The world is holding its breath. In the turbulent heart of the Middle East, a fragile quiet has fallen, but it's not the quiet of peace. It's the silence after the storm. After years of a shadow war fought in secret, a series of devastating military strikes have rocked Iran's nuclear facilities. The attacks, a coordinated and audacious display of force, were declared a success. The underground halls of Fordo, the sprawling complexes at Natanz, and the crucial facilities at Isfahan, all centers of Iran's nuclear ambition, have been heavily damaged. Their operations dealt a staggering blow. But this isn't the end of the story. In fact, it may be the beginning of a much larger, much more dangerous one. The strikes may have damaged the factories, but they didn't destroy the knowledge. And most critically, they didn't destroy the fuel. Somewhere in Iran, secured from the prying eyes of satellites and spies, sits a massive stockpile of enriched uranium. Before the attacks, Iran had amassed over 400 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity, material that is just a short, technical step away from weapons grade. That stockpile, enough for several nuclear bombs, is now one of the most dangerous substances in the world. Its current location is a mystery. There's credible analysis based on satellite imagery of truck convoys to suggest that Iran moved much of this stockpile before the bombs fell. The strikes didn't eliminate Iran's nuclear program, they scattered it. They've pushed it deeper into the shadows and perhaps pushed the region one giant leap closer to the abyss. The question is no longer if Iran can rebuild, but when. And what happens when they do? A new clock is ticking. The countdown to a Middle East crisis has begun. Section 1, the genesis of an obsession. So how did we get here? To understand the precipice we're on, we have to rewind the clock decades, to a time when Iran's relationship with the West was entirely different. The story of Iran's nuclear ambitions doesn't begin with the Islamic Republic, but with the man it overthrew, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Back in the 1950s, under President Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace program, the United States itself provided Iran with its first research reactor. The Shah, a key American ally in the Cold War, envisioned a future where Iran was a dominant technological and military power, fueled by a network of nuclear power plants. And Western companies were lining up to help him build it. But the 1979 Islamic Revolution changed everything. The Shah was exiled, and the American-backed monarchy was replaced by an anti-Western theocracy under Ayatollah Khomeini. The nuclear program, seen as a symbol of the West, was initially scrapped. But the long and brutal Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s would reshape the new regime's thinking. Facing a relentless onslaught from Saddam Hussein, who had no problem using chemical weapons, the Islamic Republic came to a stark conclusion. To guarantee its survival, to deter its enemies, it needed the ultimate weapon. The abandoned nuclear program was secretly revived, but this time its purpose was far more ambiguous than just generating electricity. For years, the program churned away in the shadows. Then, in 2002, an Iranian opposition group blew the lid off, revealing two secret sites: a uranium enrichment facility at Natanz and a heavy water plant at Arak. The world was stunned. Iran had been enriching uranium, the key process for creating both reactor fuel and bomb material, right under the nose of the international community. The discovery kicked off a diplomatic crisis that would define the next 2 decades. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, began a series of tense inspections, often met with Iranian defiance. In response, the international community, led by the U.S., slapped crippling economic sanctions on Iran, hoping to squeeze its economy and force it to the negotiating table. But the program just kept growing, and becoming a source of intense national pride and a central pillar of the regime's security doctrine. It had become an obsession for Iran and for its enemies. Section 2, the Shadow War. As diplomacy stalled and sanctions tightened, a different kind of war began. It was a clandestine, high-stakes battle fought not on open fields, but in the digital realm and on city streets. This was the Shadow War, a campaign of sabotage and assassination designed to cripple Iran's nuclear progress from the inside. The most famous shot fired in this conflict wasn't a bomb, but a piece of code. In 2010, the world learned about Stuxnet, a computer worm of unbelievable sophistication. Widely believed to be a joint American-Israeli creation, Stuxnet was a digital ghost that snuck into the control systems at the Natanz enrichment facility. Its mission was simple: subtly tell the high-speed centrifuges to spin themselves to destruction, all while feeding normal data back to the oblivious Iranian technicians. It was a masterpiece of cyber warfare that set the program back significantly without firing a single shot. But the war wasn't just digital. A string of mysterious deaths started to plague Iran's top nuclear scientists. Between 2010 and 2012, 4 leading figures were assassinated in broad daylight on the streets of Tehran, often by masked assailants on motorcycles who would attach magnetic bombs to their cars. Then in 2020, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the man seen as the father of Iran's nuclear program, was killed in a complex ambush with a remote-controlled machine gun. Iran immediately blamed Israel's intelligence agency, the Mossad. While Israel never officially confirmed it, the message was crystal clear. No one involved in the program was safe. These covert actions, cyber attacks, assassinations, and intelligence coups created a storm of paranoia and pressure. They bought time for diplomacy, but each attack also hardened Tehran's resolve. For Iran's leaders, these weren't just attacks on a program. They were violations of sovereignty. They reinforced the idea that only a nuclear deterrent could truly protect the nation from its powerful enemies. The shadow war slowed the march toward the bomb, but it also made the destination seem more necessary than ever. Section 3, the deal and its collapse. Years of sanctions and sabotage led to a stalemate. Iran's program was moving forward, but its economy was suffocating. The West feared a nuclear-armed Iran, but dreaded the alternative, a full-scale war. This mutual pressure cooker eventually forced everyone to the negotiating table, leading to the landmark 2015 agreement, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA. The JCPOA was a complex bargain. Iran agreed to drastic long-term limits on its nuclear program. It would dismantle 2/3 of its centrifuges, cap uranium enrichment at a low 3.67%, and redesign its heavy water reactor so it couldn't produce weapons-grade plutonium. In return, the crippling international sanctions would be lifted. For a moment, it looked like a historic breakthrough, a non-violent solution that verifiably blocked all of Iran's paths to a weapon. But the deal was controversial from the start. Critics, especially in the US and Israel, called it flawed. They hated the sunset clauses, which allowed certain restrictions to expire after 10 or 15 years. They argued it ignored Iran's ballistic missile program and its support for proxy groups across the Middle East. In 2018, that opposition led to a seismic decision. President Donald Trump, calling the JCPOA the worst deal ever, pulled the United States out of the agreement. He reimposed harsh American sanctions in a campaign of maximum pressure, hoping to force Iran into a better deal. The other signatories, Germany, France, and the UK, tried to save it, but without the US, the deal was on life support. Iran initially stuck with it, hoping the other world powers could make up for the US sanctions. But as its economy tanked and the promised benefits evaporated, Tehran's patience wore thin. Starting in 2019, Iran began to systematically and openly violate the JCPOA's terms. It restarted enrichment at Fordo, built more advanced centrifuges, and started piling up enriched uranium far beyond the deal's limits. The collapse of the JCPOA unleashed the very scenario it was designed to prevent. With diplomatic channels crumbling and inspectors' access shrinking, Iran began a sprint, enriching uranium to 20%, then 60%, a level with no credible civilian justification. The world could only watch as Iran's breakout time, the time needed to produce enough weapons-grade material for one bomb, shrank from over a year to a matter of weeks. Section 4, the current crisis, anatomy of an attack. This dangerous sprint set the stage for the dramatic escalation of June and July 2025. With diplomacy dead and Iran on the nuclear threshold, Israel and the United States decided to act. In a series of coordinated attacks, advanced bunker buster bombs and cruise missiles slammed into Iran's key nuclear sites. The main targets were the heavily fortified underground enrichment facility at Fordow, the larger complex at Natanz, and the vital uranium conversion facility at Isfahan. Initial headlines quoting the White House declared the facilities obliterated. But behind the triumphant declarations, a more complicated and alarming picture emerged. Satellite imagery confirms the strikes caused massive destruction, battering centrifuge halls and crippling critical infrastructure. But the program is far from destroyed. Pentagon and expert assessments suggest the strikes set back Iran's program by maybe 1 to 2 years. Here's the core problem. The strikes were a temporary tactical success, but they risk becoming a strategic failure. While the facilities are badly damaged, Iran still has the two most important ingredients for a bomb: the know-how and the raw material. Its nuclear expertise is homegrown, with a generation of scientists who know how to rebuild what was destroyed. More urgently, there is the mystery of the missing uranium. Before the strikes, the IAEA verified that Iran had over 400 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%. Much of this stockpile is now unaccounted for. It could be scattered across multiple locations or hidden deep within a new, secret facility, like the one suspected to be under construction at a site dubbed Pickaxe Mountain. This missing stockpile is a massive proliferation risk. It's the fuel for a bomb just waiting for a factory. Iran's political response has been swift and defiant. It has drastically slashed its cooperation with the IAEA, expelling key inspectors and shutting off surveillance cameras. This move has effectively blindfolded the international community, making it nearly impossible to know what Iran is doing. The attacks have shattered any remaining trust and are likely to reinforce the hardline view in Tehran that a nuclear weapon is the only real guarantee of security. The strikes didn't end Iran's nuclear ambitions. They may have just validated them. Section 5. The Countdown: Scenarios for a Regional War. The devastating strikes and Iran's defiant response have shoved the Middle East into its most precarious moment in decades. The region is a tinderbox, and several scenarios could light the fuse for a full-blown war. The first and most immediate danger is Iranian retaliation. Tehran has a long history of asymmetric warfare, using its proxy forces across the region, like Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen, to hit its adversaries. A retaliatory strike on Israeli or American targets could trigger a cycle of escalation that quickly spins out of control. U.S. and allied forces across the region are on high alert, bracing for exactly that. The second scenario centers on Iran's nuclear breakout. With international inspectors effectively blinded, Iran could decide to make a dash for the bomb in secret. Using its hidden stockpile of 60% enriched uranium, and rebuilding a smaller clandestine centrifuge operation, it could potentially enrich the material to the 90% weapons-grade level in a matter of weeks. While building a working warhead would take longer, the act of producing weapons-grade uranium would be a red line for both Israel and the United States, almost certainly triggering a new wave of military action. This time, it wouldn't be a hunt for facilities, it would be a hunt for the material itself, a far more difficult and dangerous game. A third possibility is a simple miscalculation. In this superheated environment, with communication channels severed and tensions boiling over, the risk of an accidental war is enormous. A border skirmish, a stray missile, or a single misunderstanding could be all it takes to unleash a conflict that nobody wants, but nobody can stop. The international response has been fractured, highlighting a deep global divide. The U.S. and its Western allies have largely justified the strikes as a necessary evil, while still calling for a return to diplomacy. But other global powers, including China and much of the global South, have condemned the attacks as a violation of international law that will only breed more instability. This division paralyzes any chance of a unified diplomatic push, leaving the region teetering on the brink. The clock is ticking, and every path forward is loaded with peril. Otro. We are at a critical juncture. The strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities weren't a conclusion. They were a massive, dangerous interruption. They have traded a known, monitored risk for a series of terrifying unknowns. Iran's program has been damaged, but its core capability and, more importantly, its motivation remain intact, and may even be stronger. A huge stockpile of near-weapons-grade uranium is unaccounted for, the IAEA has been blinded, and the Middle East is waiting for the next move in this deadly game. The setback to Iran's program could buy a few years, but the political fallout is happening right now. Trust is shattered, and the path to a peaceful, diplomatic solution looks steeper and more difficult than ever before. The world is now facing the sobering reality that military action alone can't destroy an idea or a nation's knowledge. It has only postponed the crisis while dramatically raising the stakes. The fundamental question remains, was this act of destruction the prelude to a new, more stable security arrangement, or was it simply the opening salvo in a devastating regional war? To keep making sense of the complex forces shaping our world, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We release in-depth analyses like this every week, breaking down the critical geopolitical issues that define our time. Thanks for watching.